Boys and girls, ladies and gents, dudes and dudettes, let's talk about church camp. Am I the only one who seems to be noticing that this world is getting worse and worse? For all the so-called Christians that claim to be running around today, and given the fact that Jesus called us the light of the world, why is there so much darkness? Why are we allowing that? What's going on, people? What's going on, church? This is something that I like to call the church camp effect. If you grew up in church, you know all about church camp. During the summers, in your junior high and high school years, your church would come together, gather up the entire youth ministry, take them to a camp in the middle of nowhere for a week-long retreat where you would spend time with the Bible, you'd spend time in prayer, you'd spend time with your friends, and most of all, you'd spend time with Jesus. During this time, you'd hear from amazing speakers, and the best part of all of it was the amazing worship services, right? You'd go out there, and this band you've never heard of would come out and perform. Smoke would fly across the stage as they came out there with their electric guitars and everything. The lights would start flashing, the music would start blaring, your arms would start shaking as they slowly raised into the air. Your voice would start praising so loud as you shook with emotion as you praised Jesus Christ, right? By the end of the week, you were so emotionally invested in this church camp that you were pouring your heart out to all of your friends and mentors as you told them how much you loved Jesus, how much you'd sinned, and how much you were going to change. You would plead with them to pray for you, and you would say that once you went back home, you were going to change and be a new person, and you were never turning back. And then you'd go home and you'd turn back to your old ways. You would go back to exactly as you were before. Sure, it might take a little bit to get there, but in no time, you were back being the same old person as you were before camp. This doesn't end at church camp either. It goes on into college too, except now instead of it being a week in the summer, it's an entire summer because we're serving as camp counselors, right? We spend 2 to 3 months with these people that we're mentoring, and we have this great time, and we go to those same worship services, we raise our hands, we hear from these great speakers, and at the end we're so emotionally invested and we feel so moved that we say, God, I surrender all to you and I'm going to be different. And then we go back to the regular world and we're no different than we were before. If anything, we try to act like we're different and we put on the facade, but really we're no different than everybody else, right? We allow the darkness to increase and we allow our light to be diminished. And this doesn't stop in college either. It goes on and on and on, so that people in the workplace, all of these people, they go to sermons for an hour or two a week. They get super encouraged by the pastor. They surrender everything to Jesus. And then once they go back to the world, they surrender everything to the world as well. And it makes you wonder, there might be a problem here. Yeah, I think there might be a problem. And I'm here to talk to you about that problem. Because you see, the problem is with the atmosphere. Now, I'm not saying that the atmosphere is inherently bad. I think it's great that we have the opportunity to have the flashing lights and the smoke going across the stage, and we're able to turn off all the other lights and give us that emotional moment. Here at A&M, we've got this thing called Breakaway, and it brings in thousands of students each week, all to serve and worship God, right? But the thing is, even there, people get lost in the atmosphere. You have people raising their hands, turning their faces towards the heavens, and saying, God, I surrender all to Jesus, I surrender. But then, when they go back on campus, they don't change. Why is that? It's the atmosphere. You see, one thing that the Western church has really failed at is that we have substituted the atmosphere for the presence of God. We have begun to worship not God himself, but the idea of God. And that's a problem. Let me put it for you like this. Consider going to Disney World. Whether you're 4 years old or 80 years old, you will feel magical. I don't care who you are and I don't care how hard you try to suppress it. You feel magic when you go to Disney World. There's something about how they've laid it all out, something about the music they play, something about just the atmosphere makes you feel magic. And even if you don't actually feel that way, that's what they're trying to get you to feel. That's their big selling point. Magic happens here, right? You go into a horror movie, same thing happens. The lights are low, all the cuts between the scenes are super fast, the tension's building up within you, you just feel yourself getting super tense as the person goes to open the door and you're saying, no, don't do it. because you feel scared. The atmosphere they establish affects your emotional response. In Disney, you feel magic. In a scary movie, you feel scared. In church, you feel worshipful. But the thing is, you could go to a regular concert and you could feel the same way. You go to your favorite artist, go to their concert, you'll have that same emotional response. You go hear a motivational person speak, you'll feel the same response. So I want to ask you, and I want to challenge you, whenever you're going to church services, or you're going to camps, or you're going to whatever, anything that has to deal with God, are you worshiping Him or the idea of Him? Are you getting enveloped in Him or in this idea that is not actually Him? It's a very challenging thing. I struggle with it myself. But this is the problem, and this is why we see so many people being inspired but not transformed. They associate certain things with God that they don't experience outside of there. You go into a service where the lights go off, the spotlights come on, the smoke fills the place, everybody around you has their hands raised, so it's very easy to raise your hands. But then you go out into the regular world where the sun is shining, there's no shadows to cover your raised hands, and everybody else is living in sin, and it becomes a whole lot easier to just live like them. So we've become very reliant on our feelings and less reliant on our actions. We've made our faith very much about ourselves and how we feel rather than about God and how we serve Him. It makes me think of John chapter 2. In John chapter 2, we read three main things, right? First, we have the story of Jesus' first miracle. He turns water into wine. And then next, we see that Jesus goes to Jerusalem for the Passover. And while he's there, he sees all these money changers in the temple, and he doesn't like that. Zeal for the Lord's house consumes him, and he starts flipping the tables. He goes crazy. He makes a whip out of cords and just goes crazy. It's not a Jesus you expect, right? But then there's a third aspect, and we'll talk about that in a second. But first, let's just look at what's happened. Water to wine, cleansing of the temple. We have a miracle of transformation followed by an act of cleansing. And this is how it's supposed to be in our relationships with God. He transforms us, and then he proceeds to cleanse us. But the thing is, like I've been saying, we've got people who are inspired, they have the inspiration, but they lack the transformation. So how can we expect the world to be cleansed if nobody's being transformed? Well, I have the answer for you, because if you go to the end of John chapter 2, it's laid out pretty clear. It says, "Now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many believed in his name when they saw the signs that he was doing. But Jesus on his part did not entrust himself to them, because he knew all people and needed no one to bear witness about man, for he himself knew what was in man." What we see here is a very interesting thing that most churches won't talk about. We have the people believing in Jesus, but then it says that he did not entrust himself to them. Basically, the people believed in Jesus, but Jesus did not believe in them, thus proving that their belief was not genuine saving faith. And then you have to ask, why wasn't it? Why wasn't it saving faith? It says they believed. In the Bible, it clearly says they believed. But you have to look at why they believed. It says, "Now when he was in Jerusalem, many believed in his name when they saw the signs he was doing." These people, like us, like our culture, became reliant on the signs, on the emotion, on the feelings. They weren't looking for the presence of Jesus. They wanted the atmosphere that he provided. That is the problem. The people didn't want to worship Jesus because he was God. They wanted to worship Jesus because he was a miracle worker. They didn't actually even want to worship him. They just wanted to believe in him as a person who could do miracles because it made them feel good, you know? Why do you have to fear becoming blind if you got a guy who can make you see again? That's the problem that we face here. And that was a problem back then, and that's a problem here. These people believed because they saw what he was doing, and they felt the emotions, and they got wrapped up in that. But they weren't following him because they weren't actually lost in him. They were lost in the idea of him. And therefore, Jesus didn't entrust himself to them. So my challenge for you today is to get lost in God. If you're at a church camp, if you're at a summer camp, if you're at a college ministry, if you're at a youth ministry, if you're at church, Or if you're in the workplace, if you're at school, if you're here at college, if you're just at home alone, get lost in God. If you hear music playing, don't just sing along. Focus on the lyrics and see what they're saying and then sing. If you see the lights flashing, don't focus on those lights, focus on the light. If you hear these people performing this music beautifully, remember that it was God who gave them that ability. In everything you do, look for God and ask Him to reveal Himself to you so that you won't get lost in the emotion, but you'll get lost in Him. You won't inadvertently mistake the atmosphere for His presence or the idea of God for God, because you will see Him in all that He is. That's all I have for you today. I hope that something I could have said there encouraged you slightly, if at all, I don't know. But I hope it did. I hope that in some way, in some form or fashion, I could push you closer to that transformation that you do desire and that God also wants for you. I hope that you have an absolutely great day. I hope that you keep a smile on your face. Don't let anybody steal your joy. And as always, find the strawberries.